Hi everybody. Hey, I'm going to do the flip through of my Jesus art journal challenge. I just finished it last week, and so I'm going to go through them all. And they're all topsy-turvy, so it's going to take me a second. And I wanted to tell you the prompts as I went. So A was Adam and Eve, and the prompts I drew were a stamp a word or phrase, so I did that on cloth and used distress ink. And so I've used that. And then here is the small one I did, because I did, a small and a large journal. So there's the small one. And I didn't use the prompts on both of them. I guess you could say cheated, and I just used them on one or the other. So B was Bethlehem. And it said, cut out a word from your junk mail and draw outlines in black pencil or ink around something. And so I did that over here. I drew the lines, and then this is from a piece of junk mail. So I used the prompts on the small one on this one. So that was Bethlehem. And then C, oh good, this is going to be in order. So C was Christ, and the prompt was draw stitches. And here's the small one. And the second one was use a stencil. And I'm looking to see what I used a stencil on. I think I must have used it in the background somewhere. And then when I went back over it, it must have faded to the back. And then D was Daniel. And here's the big Daniel. And the prompts were torn paper layer and use white gesso through a stencil. And that texture on here was white gesso through a stencil. And I did the same thing on the small one as far as using this texture. You can see it on there. And then there was a torn paper layer underneath the very bottom of it. And then E was Esther. And Esther was apply tissue paper. And let me get this Esther out here. Was apply tissue paper, and I put that tissue paper over what I wrote underneath it. And underneath it was, I believe I was supposed to write a letter, and I didn't get that prompt put on here. Write a thank you note to Jesus. And I can see the words through there, so I think that's what that one was. And yeah, I don't see it on this one. So I think that's what it was. So that was E. And then F was fruit of the Spirit. And it was cut out a crown and add it. So I did that. And hand stitch a piece of fabric. And so that's what this is actually fabric. This watercolory looking background is actually a piece of fabric. And then I stitched decorative stitching onto it. And then over here is this small fruit of the Spirit. And G was grace. And the prompts were doodle a border. So I did it over here. And use 3 different washi tapes. So let's see if I did that. Oh yeah. Okay, so I did 1 washi tape on this one, and then I did 3 different ones on this one. So that was grace. And then H was healing. And those prompts were add something purple. So that kind of set the tone of that. And here's that one. Empty your paper punch and apply contents. So that's what those round paper things are. I was Israel. And the prompt was add a picture of a fox. So there's a little fox down here. And use string. Did I not use string? Oh, there's string. I used string around the letter. And then over here is this one, which has a map of Israel. Which has a map of Israel that I added into it. J was Jesus. And the prompts were used part of an old postcard and use mica spray. And so there is, you can see the iridescent, hopefully you can see it. And then here's Jesus in the small one. Had all the names of Jesus. And K was kindness. And my prompts that I drew were use white dots and scrape paint onto the page. And there's kindness. And so I did that. You can see where I scraped the blue paint on both of these and then used white dots on this one in the flowers. Whoops. And then L was the lion of the tribe of Judah. And on that one, I just decided to paint a lion. I used the painting from my Etsy kit on the little one. And the prompts on this one were add a ticket. So there's a ticket over here, something from high school. And I think I put a picture. I'm trying to think what I used from high school. Oh, I know what I did. I put the year that I graduated. I put a whole bunch of times the year I graduated and let that be my base. But I ended up, for the most part, covering it up. So it might peek through here or there. Yeah, there it is there. So sometimes the prompts really add to it. Sometimes they don't. I mean, obviously this red ticket's not adding a whole lot to the whole thing, but okay, here's M, Moses, parting the Red Sea. And the prompt was use an art supply you've never tried. And I think I used, can't remember now what I used that I hadn't used before. I'm not sure what it was now, but the other one was use a paper doily. So that really kind of helped me and kind of drove the whole thing because I let the doily be the foam on the waves of the water. And then over here, I just used what was in the kit. And then N was Nehemiah. They're pretty similar. I did about the same thing. Use some lace and draw this 10 times, this little leaf. So I incorporated like a vine coming down the wall. And then on the lace, I ended up finding this lace that wasn't real feminine. And I thought that was kind of a nice addition. Added some detail to it. And O was oil, as in the story of the widow and the oil. And so I had just kept adding as many containers as I could and filled them with oil. And oh, this is the one I did the thank you note on. Yeah, write a thank you note to Jesus on the page. So that's in the background, and then add a feather. And I ended up just drawing a feather pen and putting the scripture here. So that's how I incorporated that prompt. N-O-P was Paul. And the prompt was add a piece of velvet. So I took this piece of velvet and kind of made a banner out of it that says a martyr for Christ, and then add something yellow. So obviously I did the background in yellow. And on the small one, I did it in a completely different color scheme. Q was quail and manna. God gave him out in the wilderness to eat. So there's that. And the prompts were add a button. So I put several buttons to represent the manna. And then the other one said a black and white copy of a family photo, which you can see it. I can see my face right there. It was my husband and I when we got married. I put that down as a base, and there's my husband's face. So that was the base. And then R was resurrection. And here are the two on that one. And the prompts I drew on that one was, let's see, create a line of color swatches. So I did that over here and use coffee. And I used coffee, and there's stenciling here with the coffee that I can see. So that's my two prompts. R S was salvation, and this was one of my favorite as far as backgrounds. I used the mica spray and the Tim Holtz spray, and got some really pretty water spots, however you want to say it, texture to it. And the prompts were stamp on cloth and add it. So I did it there and here. And add a butterfly or insect. So I put butterflies on here. On that one. RQRST was the 10 Commandments. And so on this big one, I used the piece from the etiquette that I gave you. Then the prompts were cut out of flour and add it. And so I put that on this one. And the other prompt was use black dots as a pattern. So I did that on here. This one, I ended up stitching little pockets on a piece of cloth and kind of hand stitching this. And I put the 10 Commandments in each pocket. U was the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which was incorporating Passover. So it was use a napkin. So this background is a decoupage napkin. And so is this one over here. That's a napkin. And then use a deconstructed tea bag. And I ended up using it on the small one. That's what that is behind this painting of the matzah bread. And T-U-V. V was, I kept skipping pages too, so it was kind of crazy. Let me flip this over. So V was veil. And so I made like the veil in the temple. And when Jesus died on the cross, it said the temple tore from the top to the bottom. And they were like 45 to 60 feet tall. Anyway, so I made the veil and I tore the edge. And then the prompt was go outside and find something to add. So I went out and got some little flowers and pressed them and put them in this little slide. And then it said add an old stamp. So I just added some gold bond stamps because they kind of went with the color scheme. They don't stand out a whole lot. There's one up there. So that was my solution to that. There's the small one. And then W was whale and Jonah. So here's an illustration from the kit that I gave you, and here's another one. I used both of those on this one. And then the prompts were add part of a birthday card. And where was that at? Where did I use that at? Oh, I used that behind it. This was actually this tissue or this off-color paper behind the illustration is from an old birthday card. It's scalloped around the edges. You probably can't see that really clearly. And then the other one was decoupage something. And so I ended up decoupaging this piece of coral. I wasn't sure it'd show up because usually you have to have a light background behind it to make it show, but it does show. It's not the prettiest thing I've ever decoupaged, but it works. So there's the W, and then X was Christmas, or not Christmas. X is for Christ. And the whole explanation of that is on there. And so there's the two solutions for that. And it was add thread. So I used that on the small one. Over here you can see all the thread that I used. And then add a bird. And I also put that on the small one. Y stood for Year of Jubilee. And so the prompt was add an old slide, which did not have anything to do with the Year of Jubilee, but I did notice that the colors of it happened to go with my background really well. So that worked out. And then I put some more just ephemera on here to just make it clear that everything on the page was not necessarily directly related to that. And then flick paint over the surface. So I did that on both of these. There's the small one. And then Z, Ziklag. So I used the illustration from the kit for that because it was like, what do you do on the worst day of your life? And that suddenly becomes the best day of your life. It says when one of your when one of your worst days becomes one of your best days. So I thought a rainbow after a storm, that kind of was symbolic. And then it said use toile or cheesecloth. So I used cheesecloth on the smaller one, and string. So I cut up string and just used it for texture. So there it is. It was really fun, I thought. And so some of you haven't done it yet. I think you were wanting to wait and see how it went. So I hope this encourages you to give it a try. It's really fun, and there's no, right or wrong answer. You just are supposed to have a good time. It's a kind of a break from the junk journaling. It's different, and you get to play with all of your art supplies. So give it a shot and put the pictures out on the Facebook group if you would. I'd love to see them. And so I thank you for watching this, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.